Good morning. This is your Bible lesson for Monday, March 23rd. We are in 1 Samuel 24. Where we last left off, we were in 1 Samuel 23, which comes before 24. And David was on the run. If you remember, David had saved the city of Keilah, and he was like, well, of course, and you'd think that they would, guard him and protect him because he saved them from the Philistines. Yet God revealed that if Saul came, the inhabitants of the city of Keilah would give him up to Saul. David dwelt in a forest, and he and Jonathan met and saw one another. And then at the end of the chapter, David and Saul were on opposite sides of a mountain. And Saul was right there about to get David, and he couldn't get him because God is sovereign, and God had the Philistines attack right at that moment, and Saul hear about it and had to go. Chapter 24, verse 1. Now it happened when Saul returned from following the Philistines that it was told to him, take note, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. So this is like the third time that he's been tipped off by someone. So, this goes to show you even more so that all of his paranoia that, everybody's against me, nobody likes me, and it's all for nothing because everybody's trying to help him. They don't know what God's relationship with David is like. They don't know David's the anointed one. They just listen to their king and being like, okay, king, here he is. We'll tell you where he is. And they're helping him out. And yet the whole time Saul is saying, nobody likes me. Everybody's against me. Nobody's on my side. But so anyway, he takes 3,000 chosen men. So David, remember, only had 600 men with him. And Saul took 3,000 men and went to seek out David and his men on the rocks of the wild goats. Now, this area of Israel it's a very rocky, mountainous area with a lot of different caves in it. And David and his men were hiding in these caves. The perfect place to hide with caves, but obviously some caves are smaller, as you picture a normal cave, but some caves are pretty big, and there's at least one cave there that David and his men were in that, it's big enough to hold 600 men, so they were deep, deep, deep in the cave. Some caves can go for miles and miles and miles into the earth, and this is one of the caves that they were in, but there were hundreds and hundreds of caves in this area of En-Gedi. They were all over the place. Well, it's miles and miles and miles of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of caves. So verse 3, so he came to the sheepfolds by the road where there's a cave. So Saul and his men are going there, and they're traveling. And Saul, it says, Saul went in to attend to his needs. Now, when you first read that, you might not have any idea what that means. He went in to attend to his needs. But what that essentially means is they didn't have any porta potties back then. They didn't have a restaurant that you could stop to go into. So Saul needs to go potty. And he has to go to the bathroom. And, he needs somewhere where he can, sit for a little while and, be in privacy. And, hey, there's a cave right there. Perfect place to go. So he goes into this cave to, take care of business. And it happens to be the very same cave that David and his men were in. Now again, these caves there's no electricity. You can't flip the light switch and turn the lights on. So he walks into the cave, walks deep enough that, men can't see him. He can probably hear them outside. They might be making a commotion, thousands of guys outside. They might be, stopped for a break. Okay, he might say, quick break. I'm just going to walk into this cave for a minute. And they might be, clanging swords around, laughing, joking. 3,000 men is a loud area. And so he goes into one random cave out of hundreds and hundreds of caves. And David and his men happen to be in it. And so there's probably somebody stationed at the front. They see Saul coming. They kind of see what's going on. They see thousands of men coming up. And then Saul happens to walk by himself into the cave. Because again, you don't walk with people to go to the bathroom. You don't have people standing around when you go to the bathroom. And so he walks deep into the cave. And And Saul's men are like, oh my goodness, here he comes. So they run and grab him. And in verse 4, they say, this is the day which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, that you may do to him as seems good to you. So evidently, and this is important to understand. So evidently this happened at some point. God spoke to David and said, I'm going to deliver your enemy. I'm going to deliver Saul into your hand and do what you want to do with him. We don't actually read about that happening previously in Scripture, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's important to understand that this is a story about what happened to different people, but we don't have every single detail of every single day, because these are real people. We have 20-something chapters about the life of Saul, but he lived like 80 years or something like that, however old he was. Maybe it wasn't quite 80 years. I don't know how old he was. But he lived a good long time. He lived a decent amount of time, 60 years or something. And and he and so like you can't compress every single event of Saul's life or David's life or anybody's life into these pages. So evidently though this happened, that God said to David, I'm going to deliver Saul into your hand. You can do with him whatever you feel necessary. Now talk about temptation. Obviously, you and I, we wouldn't really be tempted to kill somebody. It's a pretty serious thing to do. But in wartime, it would be a lot more tempting to go and kill somebody in wartime, especially if you're an enemy, especially if they're coming after you, and especially if God says to you, hey, I'm going to give you the okay. You go ahead and kill him. Do with him whatever you want. I'm going to deliver him to you. I'm going to give you an opportunity to kill him, and you can do it if you'd like. And so basically, it's almost like a free pass, right? And David would be justified. It wasn't like he would be murdering him. It's battling him. He's defending. It's be self-defense. And so David has this opportunity that he would not be wrong for. If he took this opportunity and killed Saul, not only would he not be wrong, or not only would it be understandable, because it's self-defense, he's trying to defend himself, and not only is he basically being told by God that everything will work out, because he knows he's anointed king, going to be the next king, he knows everything will work out. He'll be tempted because then he can go back home to his family. The soldiers wouldn't be after him. He's been on the run for years now, or at least a long time, and it'd be so tempting because it would be like, after all this would be over, I wouldn't have to hide. Because he every single day he is under the pressure of, if I make a wrong turn, I'm dead. And all I have to do is kill Saul right now, and he's free. And it's not like killing Saul and it would be wrong. Killing Saul and it's okay. He's told by God that I'm delivering him into your hand. You can do it if you want to. And yet what does he do? We read in verse 4, he rose and secretly cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He takes the knife. You can picture him walking up, taking the knife, coming up behind Saul. I don't know if Saul actually had his robe on at the time, or whether he had hung it on a rock or whatever, but he gets close enough to Saul to cut off a corner of his robe. He goes, he raises the knife. His guys are behind him going, yeah, go ahead. And he goes and just instead cuts off the corner of his robe. And it says afterwards that David's heart troubled him because he had cut Saul's robe. Now, we don't really understand the symbolism here. The symbolism is the corner of your robe, the what's it called? This part of your robe or whatever, the seam. No, whatever it's called. It represented your royalty. It represented his authority, the king's authority, and so David cut off his authority essentially, and he said he did that act, and his heart troubled him. He was given the okay. Again, this is just evident of where David's heart is. When David's heart is after God, David is so humble. He has so much humility that he feels bad for just cutting off the corner of his robe when he was given the okay to kill him. And so verse 5, it happened afterwards that David's heart troubled. Yet verse 6, and he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing as the anointed of the Lord. And David knows that he is now going to be anointed the next king, but David has so much respect for God and so much respect for God's authority that he doesn't want to take part in that at all. He doesn't want to have anything to do with removing God's authority from someone. And so you can even picture David's men being like, come on, just let me do it. David's men were probably asking him, begging him to kill Saul, and even offering, I'll go do it, David. But David refused, and so Saul finishes up what he was doing and leaves the cave, and Saul walks out. In verse 8, David also rose afterwards, went out of the cave, and called up to Saul, my lord the king. And Saul looked behind him and saw David. So you can picture yourself in the story here. Saul is looking for David. Saul wants to kill David as more than anything. He wants to destroy him. He wants to kill him. And he's looking everywhere. He's been up and down the entire countryside. And he just goes, I had to go to the bathroom, goes into a random cave of hundreds, takes care of his business. And as he's walking out, if it was a bathroom here, the bathroom door open. As he's walking out, he hears a voice from behind him, and he turns around and sees the very person there, and he'd be shocked. And David, at that point in time, in verse 8, David stoops with his face to the earth and bows down. And David says to Saul, why do you listen to the words of men who say, indeed, David seeks your harm? Now, David knows that nobody is speaking to the ears of Saul saying that, spreading rumors about him. I think he knows that it's Saul and Saul's paranoia, but it's actually a smart approach of David here, because Saul knows these insecure, people-pleasing, defensive people. Saul has difficulty admitting his own wrong, so it can be sometimes easier to have a softer answer. Sometimes it's important to be abrupt, sometimes it's important to be softer. And so here Saul would be able to, it's important to David to at least try to just get through to him. And Saul here could be like, well, somebody told me that were trying to kill me or something. Instead of David being like, you're wrong, Saul, he kind of comes with a softer answer, says, I don't know if somebody's saying something about me, but I just want to show you, like in real life, that it's not me. And so he, in verse 10, he goes, look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you into my hand, and someone urged me to kill you. That's one of his men. We're like, go ahead, kill him. But he said, my eyes spared you, and I said, I will not stretch my hand against you. And he said, verse 11, moreover, see, yes, the corner of your robe is in my hand, for in that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you. And see, there is neither evil nor rebellion in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my life to take it. So you can kind of see Saul, like walking in your mind, walking out of the cave, hearing a voice behind him, which was kind of a freaky situation if you were just going to the bathroom and in the dark, and all of a sudden you hear like a voice right there, be like, whoa, and so he turns around, sees David, he's shocked, but before he can really register what to do next, David shows him the corner of his robe, and he looks down and sees the corner of his robe missing. And that must have been just a huge weight of like, oh my gosh, I was just dead. I could have been dead. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation before, but when you get older, maybe you're driving or something, the first time that you have a really close call, it's really scary. When you maybe take your eyes off the road for a second, and then you look back, and all of a sudden there's a car stopped in front of you, and you slam on the brakes, and then you just almost hit the person in front of you. Oh, it's just like your heart, like your stomach's like up in your throat, or you look and you look away and you might be in the other lane or something, and you pull the wheel back or something when a lot of new drivers that might happen to, and it's scary. Or somebody comes into your lane and you just miss them. I remember there was one time I was driving home at night, and there's a really difficult turn to take in Weymouth, and I was probably 17, and I was in my lane, I was fine, but there was a big SUV that was coming in the lane next to me, and oops, sorry. that was coming in the lane next to me. And this turn was a really wide turn. It's really deceiving at first. And they were going way too fast for the turn. They were going way too fast anyway. And then on top of it, this turn you have to go even slower. So they went around this turn, and their momentum took them all the way into my lane. And they were flying. And luckily I was paying attention, and I wrenched my wheel to the side. And I feel, and it's funny how this happens, because people say this all the time, but everything kind of went almost like in slow motion. You must take in everything around you. And I turned my wheel. I remember seeing his rear view mirror going by my window, and I was like, and I, was almost up onto the grass on the other side and back down. The guy was just flying. Guy, lady, I don't know, it was whoever the person was. And I remember I was just like, my heart was beating so fast, because I was inches away from death. And Saul must have been thinking this too, like, oh my goodness, he could have killed me. And I didn't even realize. I was just sitting there humming away, la 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 la, whatever he was doing. And so David shows Saul, I could have killed you. And he says, let the Lord judge between you and me. Let the Lord avenge me on you. My hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancient says, wickedness proceeds from the wicked. He said, basically, if I was going to do wickedness, it's obvious I could have done it. And so it was, as David finishes speaking these words, Saul said, is that your voice, my son David? And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. So Saul gets really emotional. Oftentimes you can get emotional when your life flashes before your eyes. And you see Saul, he says, you are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, whereas I have rewarded you with evil. You've shown me this day how you've dealt well with me, for when the Lord delivered me into your hand, you did not kill me. And he's admitting that he's wrong. And he's apologizing. In verse 20, he even says, this is pretty amazing, and now I know indeed that you shall surely be king. Saul finally admits it. He had the suspicion that God was anointing David to be king before. Now he really knows it. And he's saying, David, I realize that you shall be king. Your kingdom shall be established forever. And in verse 21, though, he says, therefore swear to me by the Lord that you'll not cut off my descendants from me. You'll not destroy my name. He goes, please just, he's kind of coming to terms with the fact that he's not going to be king. He goes, please just don't, because it would be often happen these days that when another person from another line comes in, they don't want to take out any competitors, so they would take the previous king's sons and grandsons and nephews and kill them all, so there would be no challengers to the throne. And so he begs David, please, I know you're going to be king, but please don't kill my family. And David said, sure. David swore. He said, I swear I won't kill your family. And and little did Saul know he already made the same covenant with Jonathan anyway. But so Saul goes home. Interestingly, though, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So they stayed in this area. They stayed in a defensive position, which shows us David doesn't really trust Saul here. And I don't blame him, because think about it. This is the second time Saul has had like an awakening, like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I don't know what I'm thinking. I promise I'm done. I'm not trying to kill you. But this is the second time. We'll see if Saul actually means it this time. So that's 1 Samuel 24. And that is it.